move forward with thinking about your final project and any other sort of catch-up things that you feel like you need to do. We are finishing reading machines today, but we might not get a lot of time to spend on it. So that might be something that we return to later this semester after spring break. Because one of the things I want to make sure that we do today is to look at a few scholarly publications that are very much make use of digital modalities. So I guess, so I guess going back to some of what Jones was saying about what possibilities are there if we think in more nuanced and out-of-the-box ways about how text can exist. And in this case, we looked at some literary text, like between page and screen and things like that last time, and we'll look at some scholarly text this time. But the most exciting thing we're going to do today is we're going to hear Elizabeth Rachira, Dr. Rachira. She's been here just a couple of years. She's on, you guys know Diana Himes, right? Anybody know Diana Himes? She's our Writing Center Director. She's working on her dissertation that the nursing program has a major project where students go out and do an ethnographic study of a rural space to look at public health issues. You know, what is it that they need? What concerns are there? A lot of it's access and immunizations and, poverty, perpetual poverty. And so what are their needs? And so they do these thick descriptions, just as we do in first year comp, of the community in broad strokes. They align that with some of the data that they're getting from the census reports and so forth. And by putting all these things together and through interviews and some field observations, they come up with some recommendations that they then give to public health. This is a public health professor. The public health students then spend their semester trying to implement whatever the recommendations are based on that study. So Diane is looking at the assignment sheet that she has involved there, the syllabus that guides that, and then the actual project that comes out of that through genre studies. And all of that, I say, because your dissertation, you have to have an external member, and this is how I learned about Dr. Rachira's work, whose work is about social justice, digital humanities, all sorts of things that I never would have known had I not worked with her. So we're also always finding new people that we will want to continue to loop into our work. So I'm excited for you guys to meet her and to hear about her work. And she has a friend, I think I told you guys, that's doing another kind of work that is within that same vein that will be interested in sharing with you guys her work too. This is an ongoing project. I know nothing about it. And she's also made available to you guys her PowerPoint presentation that she's going to present from. So you'll have access to that. She wanted you guys to have access to her notes if you need it. So we have a little bit of time before she comes on board. Do you want to get a few of our rhetorical précis done? Who has some today? Okay. All right. All right. Well, do it.
The article for my rhetorical précis is called Shakespeare's Digital Flow, Humans, Technologies, and the Possibilities of Intercultural Exchange.
Where'd that come from?
I found this through actually the library's database.
What's it? What journal?
Let me see. It's Shakespeare Studies out of Columbia.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's by Stephen O'Neill. So Stephen O'Neill argues in his article Shakespeare's Digital Flow, Humans, Technologies, and the Possibilities of Intercultural Exchange that because of technology, Shakespeare continues to have cultural influence Shakespeare's influence and intercultural exchange is possible due to digital information flow, which is, as I understood it, flow across digital networks, media, timelines, and cultures. O'Neill states digital technologies and cultures associated with speed, vernacularly produced content, and its searchability on a global scale, making manifest the extent to which there is no one iteration of Shakespeare. The traditional idea of the bard is entangled with other uses and expressions of Shakespeare via networks that we can and also cannot see because they comprise non-human things like search engines and algorithms. O'Neill backs up his argument by giving an example of how the platform Storify connected a speech in the play Sir Thomas More with the refugee crisis that was taking place in Europe. The speech called The Stranger's Case was used to show how Shakespeare was advocating for compassion and empathy for refugees. The speech went on to be recited in 2010 and 2013 by Ian McKellen before the crisis, which began around 2015. O'Neill explains how this recitation by a famous Shakespearean actor posted to YouTube received comments through YouTube, Twitter, and newspapers related to the 2015 refugee crisis. This type of extraordinary, I'm quoting again, and seemingly endless flow of relations helps to reshape or shape our image of Shakespeare as not just a cultural icon, but forces us to focus more on the ideas and the politics, the ethics that are circulating and being expressed in and through Shakespeare. And O'Neill, he writes in an academic tone for an audience of Shakespeare scholars specifically. At times, he appears to focus and kind of give opinion about social justice issues because of the crisis about refugees. And he cautions readers to be careful about appropriating Shakespeare for certain causes. That's something that he mentions a little bit in his article.
Does he think that that's something that happens a lot?
He didn't say that it happens a lot, but
don't do it.
He wants to be careful of not positioning Shakespeare as like, oh, this great ethical person who, he cares about the refugees, or whatever. But in this instance, it seems to be applicable, I think, and people were kind of referring to that. And he talks about how a right-wing, very right-wing UK newspaper was like criticizing the use of Shakespeare to protect like immigrants and all this stuff. So
yeah,
it was really interesting, and I liked it because it kind of fit in with the idea of algorithms and with reading machines and using non-humans to kind of read Shakespeare and kind of pick out words in Shakespeare to promote an, I guess, idea.
Is that what drew you to the article?
Well, I typed in digital humanities and projects, and I found this.
Okay.
I was like, oh, okay, Shakespeare. I
There
like
you go.
Shakespeare, and it was recent, so
Excellent.
2018.
And also really interesting, a digital project making arguments that mimic many of the things that we're talking about here in something like Shakespeare Quarterly. Yeah, it's very increasingly common in the in Modern Language Association and their journal. But yeah, I'm seeing it more and more and more, even in more traditionally more seemingly stodgy journals. Stodgy. I like Shakespeare. But.
I was looking for Irish stuff, but I found Shakespeare instead.
Yeah,
So I was like,
well.
this is like.
And that guy named Ian was reading this up. So I get a little sprinkle in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anybody, any discussion about that? Other rhetorical crises?
I think I have one.
All right.
I'm not sure if it wound up there right or not. Neil Coffey of the University of Buffalo and Neil Bernstein of Ohio University in Digital Methods and Classical Studies, published in the Digital Humanities Quarterly, wrote this introductory essay on the papers presented at the 2013 Digital Classics Association meeting entitled Word, Space, Time, Digital Perspectives in the Classical World. Coffey and Bernstein summarized a conference paper stating that both philologists and archaeologists will benefit from the new publicly available projects afforded by digital methods specifically digitizing derived textual information, such as known places in antiquity and unique identifiers for ancient people. The author's purpose was to illustrate how classical studies, which traditionally integrated the study of literary and archaeological sources, will benefit from developing digital infrastructure, resulting in easier creation and dissemination of new analytical and pedagogical applications. Pardon me. The writers write in an academic tone for classical scholars and educators.
Did you find anything that you think might be directly useful, immediately useful, or was this more just a idea generating piece for you?
No, actually, what I was using this for is this was my first foray into, the final project, which keeps morphing in my head. And I was like, okay, where can I find mythological allusions? And so I started like, okay, let's go with the classics because that's where most of them are going to be found. And I think the most interesting piece was the one database where they were, trying to tie actual physical locations and people with, the references that are contained in the classic literature.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
I didn't know I was going to get into, when I first picked it up and was looking at it, was that it was a summarization of, just an entire conference. So it was like jumping all over the place from, presenter to presenter. Mm-hmm. But, trying to piece it all together, especially from the archaeological standpoint, it got a little bit interesting. So.
Yeah. Oh, a nice clean summary of a very complex, those intros are hard.
I liked it because what really was kind of fascinating was the conference took place in 2013, but this wasn't published until 2016. So I was like, okay, what's going to happen now?
That's a good point. Things move fast, and the publication process moves slowly. Oh, excellent. Okay. Greg, did you say you had one?
Yes, ma'am, I have one.
I had something I wanted to add about the last.
Oh, please.
That if you're looking for mythological allusions or anything, that there's a website called Genius, which is kind of like a wiki. People dump lyrics, people dump literature that's out of copyright in there, and you can search for. You could search for Poseidon. You could search for Zeus, and anything that's that comes up, whether it's a story that someone's posted there or song lyrics, you want to make allusions a little bit more contemporary, they pop up there, and it's easy to, then you can share those links with students, and then they can look at them out, as kind of a flipped classroom activity.
So it's Genius?
Yeah, genius.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
Anything else? Or I didn't give you guys a chance to talk to Daniel either. All right, Greg, take us away.
Okay.
Or leave us here.
I had my article was Networking Dickinson, some thought experience. And Mary Lofelholtz in her article, Networking Dickinson, some thoughts, experiments, and digital media argues that scholars have failed to utilize data in Emily. Sorry, someone's got their, someone needs to mute their.
Oh, yeah, I'm hearing some.
There it goes.
Yeah.
Dickinson's writings in any data-driven analytical or interpretive projects, which are the driving force behind digital humanity. She supports her assertion in detailing ways in which electronic archives that are currently available may be used to help researchers map out and better understand writing. Her purpose is to demonstrate the value in developing new digital approaches that will help further understand and spur interest in Dickinson's writing. The author writes in a conversational tone aimed at like-minded Dickinson academic scholars. The author begins her narrative discussing her university's hosting of Days of Digital Humanities event in 2013, and exploring the question of just what do digital humanists do. The question was raised at the event, in a friendly stage debate was established between the importance of carefully encoded close textual detail versus machine mined big data for the future of digital. Big data, it was argued, allows us to explore how writers exist inside of a much larger literary economy. This particular debate led the author to begin thinking about the possibilities of the future of digital work and the study of Emily Dickinson, which is what she is familiar with. And pretty much, she says that she wasn't familiar with digital humanities at all until she started paying attention to this thing that digital humanities that she hosted. She was really an Emily Dickinson scholar, and then listening to that made her start thinking about all the processes and things that she could do within Emily Dickinson as a scholar in her own right. And then studying Emily Dickinson through the methodologies of digital inquiry would actually wire Dickinson's writings into the larger network of 19th century letters and beyond. But according to the author, there's been very little to no efforts to do just that in Dickinson's studies. The author then discusses the launching of the Emily Dickinson Archive in October of 2013, and she pointed out the linking of images of Dickinson manuscripts with a wide range of existing editions. And then she springboarded into discussion of various thought experiments that would develop into sophisticated and flexible interactive visualizations of Dickinson's network of correspondence during her life. She then draws the reader to look at several poems and discusses how digital humans study the poems compared to other macro examples of her day as synthesized through the digital data resources. So that was a mouthful.
Okay, yeah. It was why'd you choose that one?
Well, gosh, one, because I can't find anything on my topic.
Okay, let's talk about that.
But for choose that, I thoroughly enjoy reading Dickinson and studying about her, and so when that popped up, I said, well, that's okay. Let me stop and pause here and read on this. And, so I kind of got sidetracked, and I thought that it would be fitting to look at that.
Hey, I'm all about sidetrack. There's good stuff that happens there too. Hey, it's just like just like a road trip. How the hell did I end up here? This is great. So you're not your topic. We're talking about maps. We're talking about westerns. Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't.
Okay. Are you finding?
Look at the wrong spot. I need one of those road maps for where the heck to look for my stuff. How about that?
Yeah, good point. We need to spend some time, I think, talking about searching because part of what we'd be looking for is the topic, the Zane Grey, right? Anything. Yeah. At this point, just all the rest is right. But we also need to find articles and digital humanities projects that do the thing that you think you'd like to do, but are not doing it with the content that you want to do it with. Yeah. So, yeah. So how do you find those things? I think especially when we get to doing digital humanities. And there's things like this would be global information system. This is geo mapping. This is once we know what the buzzwords are, then we can start to bring these pieces together. And the Doing Digital Humanities is a newer book, so it'll include a lot of the plug and play kinds of digital humanities tools that we can work with. But you may not find stuff that is directly relevant. It might also be time, because all of you guys have a lot of entries in your 20 entries thing. Start pilfering each other's bibliographies. I mean, are you guys open to that? Let other people in, take a look. So they're shared for that. Maybe dig around in there and see. And maybe also, when you find something that's sort of adjacent to something fabulous in maybe something we've read together or something you've read individually, tell for that bibliography. Maybe there's some sweet spot in there. and then share with us your finds on that.
Yes, ma'am.
So, but we definitely need to begin talking a lot more about your final projects because it's week 8. Other digital humanities projects? Oh, excuse me, not digital humanities project. Abigail, yes, go ahead, Kate. You on? You're on the air. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. I just had another rhetorical crisis when you're ready for one.
Yes, please. We're in. I'm ready. And just a second though, Abigail, do you want? I was thinking for the digital humanities project, do you want to present it after Elizabeth comes on?
Yes.
Okay, good. As I don't want you to be rushed. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so my
You there.
I'll do it. Digital humanities project I found called the Victorian Women Writers Project. And so I'm just going to try to share my screen, but I don't think I'm going to do it right. So
Okay, go for it.
we'll see if this works. Who knows, really?
Well, do a test because Elizabeth's about to do it herself. So.
Continue. Let's see. How about, yeah, that'll work. So can you see?
There she is.
Cool. But now can I still access my other thing? Yeah, I can. Cool. Okay, so I said the Victorian Women Writers Project team in their digital humanities project examined the influence of lesser known writers of the 19th century by supplying the reader with information about the backgrounds and work of female writers in this period. The project team expands on the significance of these writers' contributions by shining light on their works and influences. The team wishes to convey to readers the importance of examining these works in order to educate readers of the work of those that were not much acknowledged for their writing during their lifetimes. The author's audience likely consists of those interested in Victorian literature, as is evident through references to other writers in their digital timeline, and they address readers with a tone that is insightful and informative. One of the things that I thought was the most interesting about this was, or like the reasons I chose it, I guess, was that as part of that Jane project that I am incessantly talking about, my hope is to have a timeline sort of like this, where like it has like the pictures of the ladies across, and then you can kind of, if you go to the actual timeline, again, I don't know if, yeah, it is sharing, cool. It shows like their timelines in relation to each other, instead of just having theirs, you know, like if you click on their picture, it has their own timeline, but this also had, you know, in relation to each other. And I liked that a lot, and that you could do it by author or publication or historical context, I guess. But what else did I say? Provides bibliographical and biographical information with different British women writers, and not just their work, but their life too, which I thought was interesting because it's not just, oh, she published this and then she published this. It's she was inspired by this person that she met here, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. So this is, I think we know why you picked it. You told us that. I mean, are you finding a lot of really useful Jane resources? It seems like you are. I mean, you got to think broadly about it, but.
Right. So we've found some good stuff. I think we just have to like put it into the format that we're thinking more, especially, and Tamara and I are working together. I'm pointing this way because on my screen she's right here.
Stage left.
I assume she is for all of you as well.
I don't know who she is.
So I think we found some good information, and we have kind of an exhaustive spreadsheet going with some good information.
So organized, these guys.
We'll see. But but it's good to see like these examples of what is out there, to see like some of it's crap. So that's good to see too.
It is, right?
I don't want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys have any questions or nothing for Katie? Thank you, Katie. Others? Who do we have on? I'll put Katie here. I've got some other rhetorical précises that I won't get to yet because it's about time for Dr. Shira to come in. My fingers aren't working. Okay, well, we have a few minutes. I think she's about to pop in at any minute. So what kind of conversation do you want her to catch us in?
Dr. Kerr, I have a question, if I may,
Yes.
about next week. I know on the agenda you said we're not meeting face-to-face, but I'm looking to present one of the DH projects that I found. So will I present in some format next week or the following week?
It is, it's up to you. That's a very good question. You can, if you want to, create a screencast and we can just put that there and leave it there or play it during our next class in week 10.
Okay.
The third option is, since we now know how to share screens, you can share your screen and walk us through. So, hello! Hi. We are excited about you coming. We have figured out how to share screens. I know you already know how to share screens.
Yes.
But can you pronounce your name? Is it Rachira?
Washira. Yes.
Rashira, okay. Can you guys do some introductions for Dr. Rashira and tell her a little bit about where you are in the program? You are assistant professor of public health.
Yes.
From where?
Here.
But where did you come?
Sorry. I did my PhD from Texas Women's.
To preach it, mine too. And okay. We have some doctoral students and some MA students and some MA students that might be becoming doctoral students if we can pull them on over. A lot of teachers. So if you guys introduce yourselves. So we've got several on this Brady Bunch screen that I guess you can see. Maybe Greg, can you talk to Rachira about who you are and what do you do and where you are on the program?
Yeah, I'm Greg Bauer. I'm the superintendent of Como-Picton. 2 schools, 2 towns, 1 school, and I have a doctorate in education and wanted to go back and get a master's in English. So I'm just starting the English process.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. This is my first class for my PhD in English.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And you're a teacher too, right, Jennifer?
Yes, I'm an adjunct professor. This semester I have taken off, but normally, yes, I teach high school kids.
Okay. My name is Abigail Mosley, and I'm in Louisiana right now, but I am a doctoral student. So I'm in my third semester of working on my degree.
I'm Peter Boyson. I'm an AP English teacher in Dallas.
Nice to meet you.
And Katie?
I'm Katie G. I teach as senior English at Flower Mound High School, and I am in my first semester of my master's program.
Yep. And Bob?
Hi, Bob Michael. I teach senior English at Seagoville High School. This is my first class in the master's program for English.
Hey now. Tomorrow? Other than being a new grandmother.
Hi, I'm Tamara George. Let's see. Yes, I'm a new grandmother. I teach freshman English for early college high school students in Dallas IC. I have a master's in education, but I am trying to work on my master's in English. It's been a dream of mine forever and a decade. So I'm taking this in an age of reason class and treading water while I teach an EOC tested subject.
And we have 2 people in here live. Everybody's alive, but we have people and you're busy. I mean, what non-traditional students of all sorts, right? So, but Brian?
Hey, go over there. Hi, over there. Brian McShane, second semester, first year doctoral program. I'm a graduate assistant here as well. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And Daniel?
All right. Same, that one, I think.
Can you see him?
I think it's that one.
My name's Daniel. This is also my second semester in the graduate PhD program, and I teach here as well, comp classes. Nice to meet you.
And I won't act like Maria's invisible, because Maria, I just heard that you actually have joined the linguistics program. It's not just a maybe, or are people saying that about you and you haven't quite?
I am working on sending over the official paperwork.
MA. The MA in yeah. All right, so I have your PowerPoint. I told them that you were generous enough to share it so that they can have it. Do you want to just share your screen, or do you want me to download it? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I can share my screen.
Okay, excellent.
All right. Hey, guys. So glad to be here. My name is Elizabeth. A little bit about my background is I have a bachelor's in nursing, and then my master's and my PhD are public health studies. So English is I speak it. Took it, prepared with it in high school, middle school, and everything. And it's my third language. So you may hear my accent coming out somewhere. I'm originally from Kenya. Born there and spent about 10 years of my life before my family and I relocated to the United States. If you're wondering where my accent is coming from. And do I need to turn down the volume, or am I okay? Or turn up?
I think it's good. What do you think? It sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. So I will go ahead and get started. And so I'll be sharing with you all my research work that I do and still continue. And the reason I fit into this class is because it uses a research at the digital storytelling. So hopefully you will see how you can use digital storytelling not only as a way to share stories, educate, but also to collect data, if that's your dissertation. So let me share my screen, and I will make sure I share the right one.
There she is.
All right. Are we still good?
We are still good.
Fabulous. Okay. So as the title shows on here, it's Let's Show It. I actually did this presentation at the Public Health Association. So I just kept the same title. They did a call for research that uses storytelling as a social justice tool. So mine fit in right in there. So this will be the PowerPoint that I share. So if I get too researchy, just bear with me, but I'm really excited about this stuff. So we'll just jump right in. So to give you a background of why I use this method, I'm interested in something called health disparities, and I will give you a definition in a little bit. But to guide the reason why I wanted to focus on this research study, I realized that we all have different outcomes. Whether for me as a public health professional, mine are health related. So we all have different outcomes based on certain things about ourselves. So for example, if you consider two employees, they both walk into a company to be hired, right? And they have similar education level, similar years of experience, but the only thing different between these two individuals is their gender. And because of this, they have different outcomes, different employment opportunities, maybe different salary. Research shows that there is a disparity in, between men and women, and if you control for similar education level and what they bring to the table. So there are still differences. Another example, and this is where I live, is in healthcare and health outcomes. You have two patients that walk into a clinic, to a hospital. They're seen by the same service provider, the same doctor, and they report the exact same symptoms. The only difference between these two individuals is their race and ethnicity, or their housing status. One is housed, the other one is not housed. They're experiencing homelessness. And because of this difference, they have different health outcomes. And this is the idea here, is to now lay the foundation. What makes certain individuals more likely to not get a job, to not get a promotion, to experience negative health outcomes, such as higher rates of disease compared to somebody else, experiencing greater health risks, for example, being sexually violated versus not being sexually violated on a campus. And in the health arena, we make these differences in certain ways. There are individual-based differences. There are, for example, based on race, ethnicity, gender, immigration status. But there are also interpersonal differences. These are the differences that determine how you and I interact. For example, that may lead to experiences of discrimination, stereotypes, stigma, prejudice, or bias. Another difference that we can rank is structural. This is now we're looking at political policy aspects, residential segregation, institutional discrimination, looking at microaggressions, implicit bias, things that are based on who makes decisions about certain things. The expression of discrimination and bias is in our institutional policy. So this is how we explain differences in health outcomes between an individual that is white and an individual that is a minority individual. But moving on to that, let me find my mouse, sorry. Moving on to that, when we look at differences, we now have outcomes of these differences. We call these diversities, where regardless of what you experience, the outcomes are very similar. You are treated differently. You are marginalized in a way that limits or depletes your resources, access, information. You have poor health, and you distrust individuals that represent that group of people that caused you to experience discrimination and social distancing. And these outcomes occur in a context where power is exercised, right? Oppressive outcomes, which makes it difficult now for a researcher to say, this is what we need to do to prevent health disparities from happening. Another way of saying that is finding what this difference is. For us in public health, we'll define a health disparity as a particular type of difference in health that can be shaped by policies. In other words, meaning that it is preventable. And the fact that it happened, it becomes an injustice because it is preventable. It's also a difference where disadvantaged social groups, regardless of whether they are in Atlanta, in a rural area, in a low-income country, people that are disadvantaged for whatever reason experience worse health and greater risks compared to others that are advantaged. Another way of looking at this is to understand what determines health. There are many things that determine why you are healthy or not healthy. One of those could be the type of family you've grown up in. Was it a divorced home? Was it a home where you were, in a home where poverty was real and experienced? Is it housing, being housed versus not being housed? Your education level, social support, employment, and your built environment. For example, do you live somewhere where if the doctor says, hey, get out for 30 minutes in a day and exercise? Well, if guns are going off in your environment and for example, gangs are an issue, it limits your likelihood of going to work out, because if we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, staying alive is very important compared to losing, right?
I don't mean to interrupt. On our end, we can't hear Dr. Carter.
It's not here. You can't hear it?
No,
It's
ma'am.
cutting in and out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let me see. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Seems better now. Yes.
Okay, I think you may be getting reverb. Just raise your hand if it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, because I can hear. I can hear. So if it becomes you let me know. Okay.
It sounds like it's fading out every few words. Like
Oh
it's,
really?
yeah, like reverb from one of, I don't know,
Okay.
from one of us.
I'll just randomly talk and you tell me if it stays constant, okay? Is it better right now? Are we good? Is there any reverb? Perfect. Yeah. Okay, I don't need to sing a song to test out. Okay, fabulous. So just hopefully you have gotten the gist of what I'm saying is that to inform my research study, I wanted to understand why we experience health outcomes differently. And so, I laid the foundation of the case study, but now talking about things that influence our health. And if we understand that we call them social determinants of health, so we will move right along. And if at any time, just stop me again. So when we rank determinants of health, we can rank them in upstream and downstream. Upstream are those things that you typically don't see. You don't see potential segregation right here when somebody is sick. What you usually see is income level, insurance status, individual health behaviors. Does this person smoke? Does this person not exercise? Does this person not take care of their health? We need to look at upstream factors such as discrimination. Is this person not coming to the clinic because they have had negative experiences with certain healthcare providers? So moving on with that, the issue is that we tend to study this as either racism, genderism, religionism, right? Any ism. They tend to be studied individually, but I wanted to study them all together. And I've mentioned oppression, okay? And there are a lot of things that in everyday life that come up because of things such as oppression and marginalization. So when somebody is disadvantaged, they're really victims of oppression. They're victims of marginalization, whether that is intentional or unintentional. So when we have disadvantaged individuals, they're actually experiencing vulnerability in that they're more likely to experience a negative health outcome because of their identity, because they are Black, because they belong to a certain gender identity, because they express their gender in a certain way compared to other people. So whatever their identity is that is considered minority, that is what leads them to experience vulnerability. And that is what informed my studies. But now I've said all that, and you're probably wondering, how do we capture all of it? We don't have time to sit here and consider all the different identities somebody can get. For example, for myself, I am Black, I'm a woman, I'm an immigrant, I'm Christian, right? I am a Latino. How do all my identities interact to shape my experience of discrimination or my experience of oppression? Because it matters. All these identities matter. So which one do we focus on? Which one is more important? Well, they're all important and all must be considered. And so how do we look at all identities together? I don't know if you've learned about, if you've taken any women's studies classes, but there is a theory called intersectionality that was first coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. And she argues that in order to understand a Black woman's experience with discrimination, You cannot take a white woman's with gender discrimination and add that to a Black man's experience with racism to understand her experience with both gender and race discrimination. If you do that, you theoretically erase her experience personally. And so we have to look at the identities from an intersectionality framework where all these identities come together. They shape a unique identity. And this uniqueness is what differentiates my experience versus your experience. And it allows for us to look at all the identities together. So now to my study. I wanted to explore how service providers perceive vulnerability as a determinant of health among homeless individuals. Why? Because in order for me as a public health professional to work to prevent health outcomes among the homeless, I have to understand their lived experience. I have to understand their everyday experience with marginalization. And by using an intersectionality framework, I dropped what is important. I said it is not their that they're experiencing homelessness that is the most important. It is not their gender that is most important. It is not their age that is most important. It is all important. And wanted to also understand this from the service provider's point of view, because in the literature, a lot of studies have been done with individuals that are homeless, but we don't know enough about the clinic context, the service context. What happens in the clinic to keep this homeless person from coming back again? What about the service provider, or what about that experience pushes them back? Am I still good on the sound?
Yeah, a little up and down, but it's better. Yeah. What do the rest of you guys say?
It's just still cutting out a lot. It seems like, is it possible, Dr. Carter, are you logged into more than one Zoom thing? Like, is it in the classroom maybe? It's like coming back? Or
I don't know.
It's like an echo.
Oh, it's an echo? Oh, that's irritating. No, I'm glad you.
There is like words
It
missing.
may be a combination of an echo and word cut out.
Yes.
Oh, good. That sounds like a great experience over there.
well, I think
It's been good here.
Well, I think we debated whether or not, because the speaker was doing so well, we didn't want to be rude, but we also want to hear. So it's
Yeah, no, I want y'all to hear.
Yes, we do too. We've got Johnny on the case.
well, we voted on Greg to be our spokesperson, so.
Good job, Greg. You're doing great.
Yeah. that's a superintendent getting in there and doing it up.
Yeah, so maybe muting the main classroom. Maybe I think that's where it's picking. I don't know. Yes, now you're muted. Can y'all hear me better? Any reverb? Okay.
right now
think that was
it's
it.
sounding good. Yeah.
I think that was it. All right. I can go on, I think. I completely forgot where I was, but we'll get started. Let me regroup here. Okay, so my study, the research study that I wanted to do, I know recapping all over again, was to look at how individuals experiencing homelessness live with being vulnerable, live with experiencing marginalization. But my target population was not the homeless, but actually people that work with individuals experiencing homelessness. And this was because there's not a lot of data, that a lot of studies that are focused on service providers. And for dissertation, they always say add to the literature, right? So this was a good way to add to the literature. And so the setting was North Texas, Denton, and they had to be 18 years and also have 3 years of experience working with the homeless. Why 3 years? Because I wanted to be able, from one service provider, have over 100 plus interactions with individuals experiencing homelessness. So recruited, called, knocked on some doors, attended a lot of volunteer sessions to recruit my service providers. And here I am, it worked. I had 3 different data collections. I did participant observations where I volunteered with the agency that services the individuals experiencing homelessness, because I wanted to get into their everyday life, at least during the service context. I wanted to see, is what the people are saying in the literature actually happening? Do these individuals experience what people are writing about? And yes, it did. I also did interviews. The first session, I did interviews with all my service providers to ask them a set of structured questions. And from this, I was able to give a prompt for them to write their digital story. And so after the conclusion of this first interview, I told them to simply share with me your everyday experience working with individuals experiencing homelessness. I did not give a definition. I did not say talk specifically about this or talk specifically about this type of individual, because I wanted to remain true to that intersectionality idea that all identities, no matter how they converge, are important. And after, when we met the second time, we now produce this digital storytelling. And so I had them write a story, a prompt on a note card about the story they were going to share, find pictures to go along with that story. And then after we laid it out on a PowerPoint, I asked them questions to get them to tell me why what they're telling me happens. And the third session was put together these storyboards, created a video, and showed them to service providers. And this provided that member checking idea in qualitative research that this is what I hear you saying. Is this actually what you meant to say? And that just simply helps validate. And so digital storytelling, it's a fabulous method if you're looking for a research method that is telling. The objective is to evoke a comprehensive account of how service providers interact with individuals experiencing homelessness. It's participatory in that the service provider determines what is most important to them. I don't tell them, tell me about this. And the idea is whatever you talk about is what is most important to you and in that context. It also provides a visual account of an individual's first-person narrative to where they become the expert and not me, the researcher. And so I'm learning from them. So it's also a very empowering method, and it has actually been used significantly, for example, with people living with HIV to tell their story, people that experience various stigma-related outcomes to have a voice. It's a very empowering method as well. It also is very authentic and insightful because I can ask you questions, but rather than me asking you questions, how about you tell me what you feel is most important? How about you tell me about what goes on specifically, however you choose in that service context? And vulnerability or any really large phenomenon, it's very hard to explain it in numbers, to quantify it. For example, on a scale of 0 to 10, people experience vulnerability at an 8. How do you even go about ranking vulnerability or ranking discrimination? So it provides, digital storytelling provides a way to explain something beyond facts and figures, beyond numbers, beyond me as the researcher saying, hey, this is what's most important based on the literature. But they get to decide. And I think from this, the greatest takeaway on this method is that from a social justice perspective, people that are experiencing injustices are often silenced. their voice is taken away for whatever reason. They've been beaten, they've been trodden upon. But then when you say, hey, I'm going to shut up, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me what is most important to you. Digital storytelling also provides a way to share information in a not so boring way. And I really wanted to do that because aside from my dissertation committee, not many people are going to read my 180-page manuscript, right? But I wanted to provide something that was meaningful, something that these service providers could take and use in their everyday work. And even individuals living this life can say, this is a great narrative that fondly shows our everyday context, not based on what you feel is important, but what we feel is important. So it's a great method. And so my whole data, I had 8 ethnographic observations where out in the cold, I started in January, finished in July, and it had to be the coldest month and the hottest month that I did my dissertation. I was there like, oh Lord, it's hot, but had to graduate, PhD or bust. And so I had observations, I had 5 digital stories and 7 interviews. And this was a way to triangulate, to be able to check is what I'm seeing, what I'm reading, and what they're saying. And in qualitative, that is very important because if you do a quantitative study, you can check for credibility and reliability by running, a correlation analysis or something. But in qualitative analysis, it's very difficult. So triangulation by asking the same questions 3 different ways provided a way for me to be able to say, in all 3 different ways of asking these questions, similar themes occurred. So it is not chance. It's actually credible and reliable. Data analysis of do in vivo, I will tell you, if you do qualitative analysis, be ready to get tired of people saying and because transcribing 1 minute took about 15-20 minutes of typing, and to stay true to everything you have to type in every and that's when I realized I really need to work on my and my because I did a lot of those. But I survived, and I can say I will, if I do another study, I will make sure I have funding for a transcriber because I'm not going to do that again. But it helped me get in the data. So now getting into the findings of this, they were so rich. It's a beautiful study, and I can still go back, and I have so many different perspectives I can look at my data. But 3 things came about. One, the major thing was that there is no typical day for the homeless or people working with the homeless. Every day is different because every day they will interact with different types of people. They will go through a different challenge. So it's not easy to say, oh, tomorrow we'll do this, because time is based on how quick they can walk to a certain place. What they achieve is based on, was it raining? Did it rain that day? Are they having to pack up all their stuff and move it to a different location before starting their day? So it was very difficult. And 3 things came about: navigating the meaning of time, which was different for people living homeless, but versus people working with this population. Navigating the system. The system is this getting housed, getting on the waiting list, getting qualified for disability, getting qualified for service. And then the other one was navigating change. Change happened completely. For the homeless, one service provider said, it's like getting used to being in prison. People that have been in prison for 10, 15 years, when they come out, it's a completely new ballgame that they have to learn how to live in everyday life. The same process happened for the homeless. Once you learn to live as a homeless individual, once you learn to survive living as a homeless individual, it changes you over time. For the service providers, this time and change, it changed their perceptions on how they saw the homeless. They used to maybe think they were lazy, people that didn't care about what they did, but then they finally realized these people are really people just like us, and we are all one paycheck away from becoming homeless. And another reason I love qualitative research is because you can get, I've experienced discrimination 4 times, but you will not get the richness of the data that you get and the background feelings, the background experiences of really experiencing that, that vulnerability. So I was able to answer my 3 research questions about how they perceive vulnerability, how service providers define vulnerability, and also how they perceive it. And the interesting thing was service providers were able to say it's a constant life of struggle. It is a constant up and down. Uncertainty is everywhere. Heartache is everywhere. But they were also able to say the homeless are some of the most resilient and resourceful individuals. That in experiencing vulnerability, they actually show that they are very capable and very strong individuals, which is a powerful statement. And also that before somebody becomes homeless, there are pre-existing vulnerabilities, whether those are financial, economic, social, family issues that are already in existence before something tips them off to where they become vulnerable. And for these service providers, they went from seeing the homeless as lazy, people with mental illnesses, to seeing them as people worthy of respect, people that can teach us that live in houses something about living. And I thought that was a very beautiful thing. So now let's go to these videos because I'm excited for you to see one. I love, if you have read To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch says, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. Well, unless you have figured out how to skin a human being and put on that skin, which is very gory, it's very difficult to step into somebody's life and understand things from their perspective. But digital stories allow us to do that. They allow us to step into their shoes and walk a mile in them for just a little bit. They allow us to for just 3 to 5 minutes, be able to step away from our life of advantage, our life of wealth, our life of being in a home, to really understand for just a second what a homeless individual faces. And one service provider stated very well, this is actually where I got my title for my dissertation. Being homeless is like Mount Everest for someone who just had both of their legs broken. It's like, why even try, you know? I can't walk. You're expecting me to climb a mountain. That's impossible. And these digital stories allowed me as a researcher to see how difficult it is for the homeless to live every single day. It allowed me to put my biases aside and really understand that living from the morning to the evening for these individuals is something to celebrate, because that means that not only did they survive the elements, not only did they survive being robbed by somebody else, not only did they survive the stigma and the marginalization that they experience in society, but they survived at the end of the day. They found a way to make $1 stretch. They found a way to walk from point A to point B to get this service. And it allowed me to understand why they show up to clinics late. They show up to job interviews disheveled, because you may say, this person clearly does not care about their hygiene because they're disheveled. But if you for 3 minutes understand that a homeless individual carries everything that they own in their back. And if it gets rained on and they have a job interview that next day, they don't have an iron, they don't have a dryer, they make do with what they have, it's going to call out some of your biases and say, wow, they're doing their very best to be here. Let me give them the respect that they need. All of that I was able to get from these digital stories. And that's why they're a beautiful way of helping understand certain lived experiences. I had 5, and the PowerPoint that I shared with you on this slide, the notes section, you can find all the YouTube videos. I posted them on YouTube so people can be able to use them to help explain the lived experience of the homeless. So I will show you one, and I hope it works. Yes.
People who are homeless are not less. They are not less than. They are not to be discarded, dismissed, downgraded, or degraded. They may be looking down when you see them, eyes fixed to the ground. And at times this ironically reflects the shame placed upon them by those who don't understand where they've been and what their eyes have seen. They look down because they're resourceful and making the most of their journey. People who live outdoors often have no pictures of their childhood, of their past, or of their present, no record of their experiences. Often without ID, they have no proof of who they are, but they have a significant story to tell that's worth listening to, and so I listen. I meet their gaze because they're worth it. People without apartments or houses have worth and value. You've passed by the place they stay 1,000 times, and you didn't know they were there. When I work with someone who sleeps under bridges or behind dumpsters in shelters, on streets or in darkened corners of a business doorway, hidden away from view, I'm reminded that this is a person who is a survivor. They are often the invisible, forgotten, ignored. But I notice and I remember and I pay attention because they are people looking for hope and scared to trust, yet forced to rely on a stranger who they believe is paid to listen and paid to care. I do care, but it could take years for their skepticism to be exchanged for genuine trust. They've been manipulated, abused, violated, belittled, and lied to, and so trust doesn't come easy. People who are homeless are not less. They are more patient than I am. They wait in lines for food at bus stops, for late rides across town, and in waiting rooms for services. My 10-minute commute to the store will take them an hour. People who are homeless are not less. They are more active than I am, walking miles a day to eat, to wash their clothes, to find shelter. The homeless are not the homeless. They are unique human beings made in the image of God with names and souls, feelings, hopes, and dreams, just like me, just like you. Their dreams have been thwarted and sometimes taken, lost. They may seem to be floating at sea with no anchor, but they are always looking to the horizon for something better, somehow persevering, holding on to threadbare hope, worn and torn, but covering the shivering part of the soul, somehow believing life is worth living at least for one more day. People without apartments or houses are not less, they are more. And we mutually hold out more to each other every day, more understanding, more respect, and more hope.
Okay, so that was one of the digital stories that I did. I give y'all access to all of them so that y'all can see them. The YouTube link at the bottom of this particular slide will take you to all 5 of those. And again, one of the reasons I wanted to use digital storytelling is not just as a research method, but as something that will give me a tangible product for my research and something that can be used. And these digital stories made by these 5 service providers have been used, for them to share about what they do, for them to raise awareness about the struggles that the homeless experience. So again, it's a really good way of just explaining something, because sometimes we tend to get too researchy, too nerdy, right? But this is just something raw and authentic. So the takeaway from my research study was that experiencing vulnerability manifests in how the homeless live, that they're hiding away from other people is because they feel, they feel unsafe. They're choosing to sleep during the day versus at night is really because if they sleep at night, they're more likely to get mugged. And in the literature, a researcher talks about sleeping is something that they need, but it's something that's actually very risky for them to do. Because when they're asleep, you hear stories about an individual that was sleeping under the bridge and they drowned. They got swept away at night. They froze to death, or they were mugged, they were killed. So sleeping is a very high risk for these population, and that's why they choose to do it out in the open, because the idea is if I sleep out in the open and somebody sees me getting mugged, the public will protect me from that. If it's raining or if it's frozen, somebody won't let me stay there frozen. They'll wake me up or they'll do something. And experiencing this vulnerability, the struggles that they face, call attention to the powerlessness and the disadvantage they face navigating the system and interacting with others. So experiencing this oppression shapes their behaviors, their lack of trust. So they won't come to their doctor's visits. They won't come to certain places because that puts them at risk. But that just pushes them away from society as a whole. And lastly, digital storytelling is a fabulous tool, not only to collect data, but as a social justice tool. It provides a rich, authentic description of everyday life. We're able to see this vulnerability as it is really experienced. It's tangible. It's something that you can easily share, something that can be understood regardless of your literacy level. And research has talked about this being a contact hypothesis, the idea that the more you interact with somebody, the more you get to understand them. And you may not interact intimately with somebody experiencing homelessness or living with HIV, or that has, is a victim of sexual violence or a victim of war. But hearing and seeing their stories allows you for just a minute to be in somewhat of a similar space with them. It is empowering for the person telling the story, but it also allows the person viewing the story to see an experience in a different way. And lastly, this study allowed me to give a definition of vulnerability, which is what I wanted, because if we can define it, we can identify it. And the definition was that vulnerability for individuals experiencing homelessness is a life of struggle where they live in hiding, in motion, and on borrowed time. So we're able to identify the most vulnerable individual who needs, in terms of triaging, in terms of saying who needs the resources right now. It's the person that is always moving, the person that is always hiding, and the person that has no control of their time. Why? Because they are unsafe. If they're in motion all the time, they're having to move around to stay alive. If they're hiding, it's because they are trying to protect themselves from the oppression and the marginalization. And if they cannot control their time to get to the soup kitchen and eat, to get to the free clinic to get services, they will not be able to get the resources that they need to keep them alive. So this study can help guide interventions that are adaptive, that can be able to fight stigma related to individuals living with homelessness, and also give us solutions on how to work and promote the health and well-being of these individuals. And lastly, again, where I started, the outcome of differential treatments is what leads to the reinforcement of health disparities. The injustices that allow for somebody to die at the age of 48 versus 76 has nothing to do with that individual, but everything to do with the society that they are living in, with their lived environment, their interactions with other people. So we have to not only understand the injustices that individuals, but we have to find a way to lessen the impact of those injustices. And we can only do that by understanding the lived experience of these individuals. So that is my study. I know we struggled through it all, but there's my information. Y'all watch those videos. If you have any questions, I'll take some right now if time allows. But if not, you can email me if you need help finding literature that has used digital stories for other things. Digital storytelling has been used for many things, for women that have experienced domestic violence to talk about that and to heal, for people that live with HIV. It has been used to teach certain minority groups how to live with diabetes by putting people that look like them and live like them in front of them and share things. So it's a great research method. It's a great way of just getting information out there. And it's a great way of tackling social injustices and using it as a social justice tool. So if there are no, I'm gonna stop share my screen. And if there are any questions, I'm here.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say thank you. Just the subject that you were presenting today really has a warm spot in my heart. I work in Dallas, but I live in Denton, so I drive through Dallas.
Okay.
And the portion of Dallas that I drive through has homeless all up and down the street. And so I was sharing with one of our other classmates, I try to take a banana or an orange or something. Tuesday even packed an extra lunch, and just the response that I received when I said, I thought of you, so I packed a lunch. The grown gentleman just started to cry. And because he was like, you thought of me, and it's a different person at the corner every day, but and so thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and other comments, questions?
Yeah, I wanted to know about the service provider who did the narration for the video. What field are they in? And because they were wonderful writers.
They were just everyday people, right? There was a social worker. This particular one was, she was a social worker. She had worked with the homeless for about 4 years, but she was also a church member. And then I had some that were just volunteers that had always just volunteered with the homeless, but they met the qualifications of having worked with this population for 3 years. And that's the beautiful thing about digital storytelling, is that your authentic voice, no matter what it is, no matter the eloquence, at the end of the day, the emotions that come about when you're reading your own story is what really help put this message across, right? For example, if I was to read the eulogy of a 21-year-old, I may have some feeling about it. But if you get the mother of that 21-year-old to read the eulogy, the feelings that come across from her reading that, you feel those yourself. And it evokes a completely different feeling than if I was to read that same script And so the power of digital storytelling, I really think, is that it gives people the voice. And because it is their voice, it makes them eloquent, no matter their education level, no matter their accent even. The authenticity of what they're saying comes about in an eloquent way. So if you listen to all those digital stories, they're very powerful because the reader is also the voice of that story.
So do I understand right that you created the digital stories?
Yes. So what I did is I was the producer, right? I had no say in how they came about, because I even went as far as, what transitions do you want? And what I did is, and I'll share the storyboard. It's just simply a PowerPoint, and all I did was actually I can show y'all, because let me hold on one second.
And while you're looking for that, I'll say that I enjoy your accent, and then I enjoy that you throw y'all in while you're. That's classic. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you. So I was just a producer, and the idea, and the reason I like this research method is that with qualitative and intersectionality, the idea is that I am not the expert in this. I am simply a co-learner with the people participating in the study, because you were the experts to you, right? I may know a little facts about you, but you are the expert of you. And so removing myself in the decision making and allowing the service provider to decide everything from, I want my voice to come in first and not the picture, allowing the picture to fade in a certain way. That was how it was. So I think I can share my screen. Hold on one second.
Well, I thought it was genius the way you worded it, about it being, when it's there's someone who's involved in it, and it being their voice saying it, and the feeling that's involved, and then putting that into the story itself. I thought that was great. I was impressed with that.
Yes.
And when you started off, and you were talking about when you started off with the Atticus, the To Kill a Mockingbird quote, it set the tone for me to listen to what you were saying. And I could think back to the Black Like Me. I don't know if you read Black Like Me with Griffin, and I read that once, and it was a white guy who had transformed himself in the 60s to go through the South. Where his skin, he had taken chemicals to rearrange how his skin looked, and he would walk around in the South, and he wrote a book about how a white, through white eyes of what it felt like to be in a black person's skin. It was a pretty powerful book. And, So it's pretty neat. And then I was thinking of that as going through that, and neat stuff.
Yeah. So here's the. I think y'all can see it on the screen. So this was just all I did is once they brought in their story, I had them type it up. So it was like a paragraph long. And I had them, I told them to pick, 6 to 10 pictures to help give the visual for this story. And all I would do was just drop the picture here and then ask them, what will be seen, what will be heard. And transition. So we did this with them, and this allowed me to be able to now, when I'm sitting at the library at 2:00 in the morning, be able to to talk about them. So I'll show y'all one, the one that y'all actually listened to. I don't know if it will show on there, but so this is hers, right? So I was able to to put every picture, and she would tell me what she wanted to be done. And I did that for all of them. And after I did that, we now had this storyboard. And this was what I put in front of them to now ask the reflection questions. I said, okay, tell me about what is blue. here. I don't know if you've heard of Photo Voice, but the show it. Show me what's happening. Why is it happening? What can we do about it? So I literally use that same method to ask them, okay, this story that you've shared, what is the message you're trying to get across? What is most important to you? Why are things this way? And what can you do to change this lived experience that you're saying in your story? And again, I know by now you probably realize I love digital storytelling, right? But I really like that it allows for that reflection piece. After they've written, after they've recorded their voice and they've heard it, I put it all in front of them and I say, okay, tell me about it. Reflect. Step out of your story for just 2 minutes and let me understand why you wrote it this way. And that allowed me to also be able to analyze what they said in the story versus what they wanted to say about the story. And those 3 data collection points led me to really understand what they thought about the homeless, what they thought about their life, and the power even that they felt in doing something about it. And what was really interesting was all the service providers, as time went by, their perceptions about the homeless changed, but they also experienced powerlessness in their inability to change this lived experience, because they were saying you can work with somebody for 2 years and then you find out that they died drowning while they were waiting for a house, and you've worked with them to get them qualified, all for them to be this close, but for them to lose their life because we didn't do things fast enough. Not because we, the social worker, did not want to do it, but because the system is the way it is, right? You can wait 3 years to qualify for disability. And in the meantime, you're having to still survive. So for the service providers, they went through a time of powerlessness as well, which came out in their storytelling.
I think a lot of people would have just taken like statistical information and put it together. And I love that you were able to use this medium to actually tell people's stories rather than generalizing.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
Did Brian have a question?
Yeah. You kind of touched on it, talking about the length of time social workers have to wait. For me, I wonder how you took a project like this and maintained any kind of distance.
It was very hard, right? Because how do you, like Tamara was saying, Tamara, I don't know if I'm saying your name right. How do you, for 3 to 4 months, see people that have really been trampled on? I mean, it was heartbreaking. But what I had to do with my dissertation chair was call out my biases and try to be as what's not necessarily black and white, but very to be able to not let my assumptions about what I knew or what I felt at that point obscure what the data was saying. But the beauty of qualitative research is that there's really no way to distance yourself from the reality. But the more I interacted with these individuals, the more I interacted in this context, called out my biases that I had about the homeless as well. It called out implicit biases, right? Unconscious things that I didn't know I have about who the homeless were and why they continue to be the way they were. And even something like realizing that I clutch my purse a little tighter when I walk by them, and realizing that they notice that, and that by doing that, it breaks their heart. It forced me to start understanding how something so little as pulling your daughter clothes or moving them this way for them reads as they're unsafe, they're untrustworthy. And one of the digital stories, actually, the third one, The Light Changed, the service provider talks about how before she started working with the homeless, she was driving And this homeless individual came to, I think either came to her window where the daughter was, and she was very scared, like freaked out, scared, waiting for that light to change. She was like, "Oh my God, this guy's about to rob us." From fast forward years later, she is now an activist for this group of people because she understands that, all they want is, maybe he was coming to them for, to ask them for something, right? Or to tell them something and not to harm the daughter. But that's where her mind went. All of a sudden, homeless guy coming towards me, standing behind my daughter's car seat. He's about to do something. When maybe, I don't know, she doesn't say what he wanted, but at that point, she was scared. So I was not able to distance myself in a way to where my feelings were not involved, but they allowed me to understand some things that I didn't realize I perceive about the homeless, and it changed how I looked at, within 2 months of volunteering, how I looked at a certain situation, day 1, changed completely in day 30 or 40, because I now had empathy. That contact hypothesis, I now knew that these are people just like me that went through some really hard times, and all they want from me is respect, and all they want is to be treated like human beings. And that is the greatest gift I can actually give them, and not even that dollar, is that treating them, like Tamara was saying, like people that desire or people that we can actually think about on a day-to-day.
I have two. One is that people who do scholarship that deals with community justice and that also have aligned activist projects, that question is such a good one. Objectivity is a myth.
Yeah.
And so it's such an important question. How do you get critical distance? Well, the critical distance, I love how you put that, is basically what are my own biases, because nobody doesn't have them. And so how to work through those biases to figure these things out. My question is a pedagogical one. So, two things. I teach a digital storytelling class from the Center for Digital Storytelling. So they're doing memoirs, for graduate students. But the next phase of it was we had a partnership with the Dallas Public Library and the Dallas Senior Affairs to work alongside with the seniors who, a survey, it turned out that the biggest problem, the most complicated thing they had was an incredible feeling of isolation. And so we were going to work with them to have a graduate student help the senior tell their story in video form that they could then share publicly. It could stay in the archives, or it could just go to their family. Do you see ways that students could work with you to help create in collaboration with the homeless people who want to tell their stories? Do you see a pattern of options? Okay.
Yes, I think so. And the more I see digital stories, the more I use them. I have an honors thesis student that for his thesis actually used digital storytelling for students that participated in his research study. And it just provides it's a really good way of telling. It's a great way of telling. And if we think about how we learn, how culture, how values are passed down, for me as an African, sitting around the fireplace and the patriarch of the family telling a story and it may be just a fictional story, but it's a story that transfers values and morals of that time. And through that story, it's not only entertaining, but it's also really reinforcing this is who we are as Kenyans, for example. We are all people that share. We, as humanity, is all about interaction, and digital storytelling allows for that humanity to continue, but now in a way that that story is not only told around the fireplace, but it can be told across whatever medium it can come to. And I think the impact of that, the story is that it still remains very authentic, but more people see and hear it, and the impact is even greater. So absolutely.
And then the story is the one that the person whose story it is wants to tell, rather than it being some kind of an external document.
Exactly.
And negotiating that is hard, right? Not trying not to overlay your voice onto this story.
It's very hard, especially if you're interviewing that person. And that's why I think just for me, the prompt I gave them was, tell me about your interactions working with the homeless. I could go anyway. But some people it went, she talked about specifically how the homeless live. Somebody else talked about their personal perceptions working with the homeless. Another person talked about how the homeless experience marginalization when they interact with that service provider. So there were so many topics, but all centered around this. This is my experience working with these people, and this is what is most important to me. And for this person, you can definitely see her passion for this population and her respect for this group of people and the resiliency. This video shows the resiliency of this population, but it also shows the service provider's passion for this group of people as well. So giving them the mic and allowing them to sing whatever song they want to sing, as long as it's a song, I think that's the most empowering thing you can do to somebody, is to say, tell me whatever you want to say. And whatever you say is important to me because it's important to you.
Lovely. Anything else? Thank you so much for sharing this. And we can look at all these other videos. I've put it up on the agenda so you guys can download that. So generous. And I have your contact information. Can I share that?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Are you guys happy? Yeah? Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You'll have a good night.
So let's give Abigail a chance. Your a blog post about math and the humanities and humanities on math. It's a delight. It's a refreshing read. Frustrating, but refreshing. Okay. I want to show you an example. I'm not going to talk about it a lot. We can do that next time. But Vector's Journal of Culture and Technology and Dynamic Vernacular is a journal that I've told you about before that is brilliant and unfortunately filled with dead links. But I'm going to show you guys something very cool. It's entirely, this is the project where a scholar, a big name scholar comes in and says, I've got this project that I think can be enhanced. I can use my data in new ways if we use digital media. And then they work with somebody who's techie and who has vision, and they figure out a way to do that. Okay, so the one example I want to show you guys, and there are tons of neat ones, and is this one called The Roaring Twenties, an interactive exploration of the historical soundscape of New York City. So I'll look at the editor's statement first. He says, so this book is about sound in New York during the Roaring Twenties, which you can certainly talk about, but how about we hear it? And he has some really interesting ways to hear it. Here's Tara McPherson, who's brilliant. Its data is mined through the time-ordered techniques of the historian in the archive through human filtering and detailed close readings. So here's the editor, Tara McPherson. A visitor to my home in LA recently commented on the noisiness of my neighborhood. I was surprised by this, as I tend to think of my slice of LA as a fairly quiet one. I then began to listen with more care, and sounds I had grown accustomed to came gradually into focus. Traffic moving along a nearby busy street, an occasional siren or helicopter, Even the howls of the coyotes camped out at the reservoir. Still, I thought to myself, it's not like New York. As much as I love that city, I'm always surprised by how loud it is and have learned to ask for hotel rooms far above the street level. The cacophony is at once energizing and exhausting. In The Roaring Twenties, Emily Thompson reminds us that it is also deeply historical and contextual. Thompson is a historian of sound, a member of a burgeoning community of scholars who turn our collective attention to the aural landscape, interrogating the materiality and texture of our sonic worlds. In many ways, The Roaring Twenties serves as an extension of Thompson's groundbreaking 2002 book, The Soundscape of Modernity, Architectural Acoustics, and the Culture of Listening in America, 1900 and 1933. In almost every case, these digital projects come from the research upon which a published book is based. So they start with the book and then they work backwards to present the data in different ways. But this piece extends that early work into new sensory registers and towards new audiences. The project proceeds from a deeply archival impulse. It richly draws from the municipal archives of the city of New York, cataloging over 600 unique complaints about noise. Noise complaints is what we're talking about, about noise around 1930, while reproducing over 350 pages of these materials. It also includes 54 excerpts of Fox Movietone newsreels, early sound experiments that at once captured and technologically remediated the sounds of New York City, as well as hundreds of other photographs and print materials. Thus, this project brings together a large array of data, but it does not deploy the now trendy logic of distant reading. Aha, no distant reading. Its data is mined through the time-honored technique of the historian in the archive through human filtering, not machines, human filtering and detailed close readings, not distant readings. Presented here, so you can see what she's talking about here. Presented here through a stylized multimedia interface, the piece invites its reader to linger with the artifacts and to listen and read with care. The pleasures of this database are not about speed and the algorithm, boy, she's just hitting everything we're reading here, but about a slow and deliberate attention. The visitor to this piece can navigate along 3 pathways, and this is a common thread in looking at multimedia scholarship, multimodal scholarship, is they tell you how you're supposed to read it, because otherwise it's not intuitive. But we can navigate along 3 pathways that organize the site's content via the rubrics of space, time, and sound, each offering a unique vantage point on the database that drives the project. When navigating the spatial pathway, the user can zoom into the various boroughs of the city, locating historical noise complaints throughout the fabric of the metropolitan region. When doing so, the vintage facade of the site is sometimes ruptured, allowing the 21st century style of Google Maps to burst momentarily onto screen. Similarly, the multi-hued Google logo sits brightly in the lower left corner of the map. These slight temporal ruptures are useful ones, serving as they do to remind us that access to the past is always mediated through the technology's inquiries of the present, even if it's quite engaging to dwell in the sounds of years gone by. Oh, I just love her. And then there's some reader response that you can. Okay, so in these, the editor has an introduction that tells about, the project in broad strokes, especially as it ties to the larger project. The author says, like an artist, this is what I intended. And then the designer, the person who came in to make some design choices to try to help the author in collaboration with them realize their vision, tells them what they did. And we won't look at all of that, but we will look a tiny bit, not this whole thing, but at the artist's statement. This was published in 2013, the last year that this journal existed. Many years ago, I published a book about sound and architecture called The Soundscape of Modernity. The book is a history of the intersection of the effervescent and the concrete. Throughout the narrative, the ephemeral vibrations of sound interact with the material world intended to control those vibrations. When I wrote Soundscape, I was interested in historicizing the act of listening as much as the things people heard or the tools they deployed to hear those things. One of the project's points I hoped to emphasize was the newness of the idea, as well as the technological reality of sound separated from the material space in which it was created. So So digitizing sound and moving it out of the space in which it's happening. Both the idea and its realization were the fruition of a distinctly modern way of thinking about sound, space, and technology that culminated in the early 20th century. And this is interesting, the limits of the technology in 2002. When the book first appeared in 2002, I was often asked why I didn't issue a companion CD filled with audio recordings of the sounds of the spaces I wrote about, including Symphony Hall in Boston, St. Thomas Church, and Radio City Music Hall in New York City. While I hope I always responded politely, in fact, the question kind of annoyed me. I felt that it missed the whole point of the book, which was to historicize, and thus not to take for granted the idea that the sound of a specific place could be technologically captured, dislocated from its origins, and relocated somewhere else. For example, onto a compact disc and hence into any listener's living room, which was primarily where one listened to CD audio recordings way back in 2002. So the CD misses the point. What he wants to use sound, but he wants to use it situated in a way that actually furthers or deepens the thesis that he had for the research project itself. It's not, New York City's best hits. Okay, so now all these years later, I find myself doing the very thing that I resisted when my book was published, but with the benefit of a technology far more powerful than compact discs at transcending the traditional connections between sound and place. In the past decade, the meaning of space, actual physical and habitable space, has been so fully upended by a culture built upon interconnected technologies of data distribution, the inversion, that the material embodiment of sound etched onto the discrete surface of a compact disc now seems as ancient a relic as the neo-Gothic statuary in the St. Thomas Church. And I'll just finish with this paragraph. People today listen to recorded sound anywhere and everywhere, and many engaged in modes of listening that are not only dissociate the sounds they hear from the places of origin, but also render themselves oblivious to the spaces in which they are physically located while they listen. So they've got their earbuds in while they're walking through the streets. The time now seems ripe to deploy these technological tools in a different direction, to use the distribution, organization, and presentation of data. I'm going to say that again, to use the distribution, organization, and presentation of data to re-invoke a sense of the very specific historical times and physical places in which the sounds of the past were embedded. So that's what he's doing here, an interactive exploration of the historical soundscape in New York City. And because this is older, we've got to always inlet the flash. All right, so can you guys hear?
Ladies and gentlemen, great to see you this demonstration here.
F. Scott Fitzgerald, what news from New York? Stocks go up, a baby murdered, a gangster, nothing more, nothing. Radios blare in the street. F. Scott Fitzgerald, Mile Lost City, 1932. This intro is traditional. And he tells us about, this comes from his book, but there are different ways to engage with this material. Here's where he tells us that there are 3 different paths, 3 complementary ways to plot a course through the content. Since all sound exists in space and through time, the user can choose between journeys built around sound, space, and time. The sound interface, this one, organizes the content by type of noise. Using categories from the era, one can select and call forth complaints and newsreel footage of specific kinds of noises, from newsboys and barking dogs to steam shovels and radio loudspeakers. The space interface plots all the complaints and the newsreels onto a street map of a city from 1933. All 5 boroughs can be navigated by familiar screen techniques of scrolling and zooming, enabling the visitor to explore specific neighborhoods and discover the noises that characterize each particular locale. And then finally, a timeline organizes the material chronologically. So I'm going to just point out a couple of things here. So we've got traffic here and we've got buses. There are 4 noise complaints. Here's one. Buses entering and leaving a garage late at night near Prince and Washington Streets in Queens. Here's who put the complaint. Commissioner Wine replied that this nuisance was within the jurisdiction of the police department under section blah, blah, blah. The inspector was unable to verify the complaint, but he spoke with the garage manager about the problem. This manager apparently responded in a way that reduced the noise, as Mrs. Williams apparently wrote back later in 1930 to commend the garage manager as well as the health inspector and so forth. Bus whistle, people were not happy with that. Noisy bus and dairy employees, there were some people unhappy with that. And then he has a video. So we're going to get the feel for that. This is real archaical stuff. And he's got source information for all of that. Information about homes, I'll just look at this here real quick. Oh, so it's, oh my goodness, lots of radio nuisances. Yeah, people are mad about that. Parade speaker about barking dogs, traffic nuisance, barking dogs, building operation, homes, streets, harbor, ferry, collection deliveries, and miscellaneous. African Americans, they were mad about street musicians and people shooting marbles in Central Park and children playing at in a pool. Asian Americans, there's nice racist stuff I'm sure here. Stuff about crowds, the newsreel, printing plant, ice plants, and so forth. So all of those have their aligned with them the actual data that he then processed in order to write the original book. Okay, so a city as great as New York City, our website's infrastructure requires ongoing maintenance. We have recently moved our map to the interface of Google Maps, but the descriptive text throughout the website still refers to Google Maps. Okay, that doesn't work anymore. That keeps happening. And then here is the data that we saw here, but now it's presented along a timeline. So this kind of thing happens, and we can scrub to get different kinds of things. See what happened there? A gas tank was constructed. So this is data that could be that was presented in a linear book form, straight from front to back. But because it's sound, it made sense to present it digitally. But anyway, there's more about the designer too. And then I want to show you one more thing, and I'll show you other things later. But this is called the CC Digital Press. Some years ago, I think 2012, Cindy Self and Gail Howitzer, who are big names in computers and writing, wanted to put together some sort of system whereby people who did born digital work that couldn't really exist, like this book about soundscapes that couldn't really exist on paper, could still get tenure. It still had to have the heft of a book. So they got together, University of Utah Press, and I think one other press. Let's see which one is. Yeah, okay. Computers and Composition Digital Press with Utah State University Press. So that's the heft. It's got an editorial board of big names, and basically this says this is a damn book. So so the books look a lot different from any other book. This one, Queer Meditations on Writing the Self, Jacqueline Rhodes and Jonathan Alexander, they work together a lot. Jonathan Alexander is now the editor of 3 Cs. So let's see, what did I want to show you first? Okay, so there's a little trailer. I mean, this is the Queering the Books or Rethinking the Book. I'll just read you this description here. Techne, Queer Meditations on Writing the Self, is a book-length multimodal exploration of technology, subjectivities, and affects. Blending phenomenology and autoethnography with queer theories, we delve into the multiple layering of text, image, and technology as sites from which to perform, write, read ourselves into the digital age. Through image, text, sound, video, and sound, Techne offers a multiplicitous and changing experience of reading and viewing. So it's supposed to make some effect on us. You know, we can't go front from back, and he's not going to tell us exactly how to go about working through this. It's going to have us go through multiple places, and we've got to get lost. Our goal is to create an excess of experience and observation, not always linking in predictable ways and leaving room for getting lost, and thus asking for our readers' active engagement in order to make sense of the changeable experience of Techne. As such, the experience of the book itself enacts a generative, multimodal Techne of self with both semantic and representational consequence. Selves in text and technology must move in multiple directions at once, embracing multimodality, multi-genre text, multimedia, and this makes me think of between text and screen because the way you move, the way you interact with it is going to give it a new shape. There's no left to right thing going here. Cells in text and technology must move in multiple directions at once, embracing multimodality, multi-genre text, multimedia. While we cannot deny the material need for stability and composure, we also need to make room for the kind of writing and the kind of subjects that challenge such composure, that offer rich, capacious, and excessive ways of reading, writing, and experiencing. Our hope is that Techne serves as one way to make that room. And I'll show you a couple of more things, but I'll show you this here. This is his very disorienting. That's Jonathan Alexander there. What just happened there? I don't know. I have to think about it. Here's the book. This is just this is what it looks like on their catalog. And we've got a ton of different ways to go through this. Orientations, introduction is straight. Everything begins with the trailer. We just saw that bad boy. Genealogies, we can go through it this way. Here's him talking about, you know, this is all personal, but also from our direction. Let's see. So all of the videos are laid out separately, which we can look at, but they're also all integrated into the book. So in this project, we delve into the multiple layers of text, image, and technology of sites from which to perform, write, read, and sell. Specifically, this Born Digital web-based project explores with its viewers. It's an interactive experiment. The simultaneous and often contradictory interplay between digital and traditional writing technologies and the authored self. So you saw there are several moments where there's text on the screen. He's holding a phone. She's holding a book. Just happens to be the 4Cs program, and then the layers of themselves and through pictures are coming at us. So like all the things that happen and don't happen as we move, I guess the aversion is what we're seeing. The existence of Techne, the exigence for Techne rendered at this particular time with these technologized objects of study through these multimedia narrations, and with this lived material stem from the increasing production of subjectivities in and through webs of information. We live in a world of constant measurement and data gathering, all social media, right? Of dense networks in which the flows of information around us are mobilized to construct our identities as commodities for marketing, profiteering, and surveillance. We can talk about plenty of that. These flows carry their own orienting forces, currents that we can become aware of and potentially direct. And by talking about these orienting influences, he's also talking about, through this book, disorienting us. Let's see what else to show you guys. Okay, in Hacking Happiness, Why Your Personal Data Counts and How Tracking It Can Change the World, journalist and social media guru, blah, 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 says these things. You become more efficient, your employer becomes more efficient, the economy becomes more efficient, and more wealth trickles down to all. At least that's the narrative we're invited to believe, to participate in, and to co-author with those around us. But we want to go further. We question this story. So they spend the rest of the book doing what they can to queer. And this is what I was.
It has no precise equivalent in English. It has been variously translated as art or craft, technical knowledge, skill, etc.
That's 4Cs.
Here we use techne as a sort of praxis middle ground, more than the clever, bold strokes of phronesis or the knowledge-making systematicity.
This is what's here.
we pose the techne of queer sexuality as a sort of generative lived knowledge. It is a view of techne that points less to the prescriptive how-to sense of the term and more to the ethical, civic dimension. This techne has two broad parameters. First, the acknowledgement and even embrace of the idea of spectacle, the alienating distance between bodily self and representation as a productive space for critique. And second, the importance of lived experience to the formation of an ethical stance. The life of the body is not to be ignored.
Perpetually embody this whole post-process, post-human. This is still the intro.
If we take a queer turn here, we do it in order to flesh out how much bodies and objects construct and mediate the flow of desires. Indeed, those bodies and objects come into being and a perception as desires, as desirable, as desiring. Many of them demand to be desired. Tracing out the ways they and we create and orient trajectories of desire, caressing attention into being, cajoling feeling into belief and action, continues the work of ideological critique, while also opening up potential for disrupting flow, disorienting attentions, and redirecting desires in more pleasurable and sustaining ways.
All right, so we have a ton of different ways through this, and they have, I think we can go directly through as they have it set up, but all of these digital texts have a bunch of different ways in, and that's the point. And some of this is just, there's a place that's just a train, and I don't know exactly where this is coming from, but you can see that all of these things here, the intro, we're talking about orientations and disorientations, the genealogies that lay out what happens over time, but also the ways in which those things get disrupted. A coda. Mobilities is a perpetuating theme throughout this book too. Here's the damn train that he doesn't. That just goes on for a bit because we're dealing with mobilities here. We juxtapose, mashup, and remix delivery and memory with orientation in the service of productive play. Such play helps us develop and explore a critical consciousness that becomes aware of the orientations that shape memory and subjectivity, as well as the potentiality to reorient them, even if through disorientation. See this disorientation theme that keeps coming up. As a techne or call for such disorientation emerges from and extends a long line of pure aesthetic practice. From this Rembrandt's call for long immense and reasoned derangement of the senses to Dada and lesbian artist Hannah Hawke's early experiments with photo montage, which is what we're looking at here, and her wish to blur the firm boundaries which self-certain people tend to delineate around all that we can achieve, to these photo montages in which she places the French poet's head on the bodies of street hustlers. I want to end there just to reflect for a second on our visitor and how she was using digital storytelling to make us rethink our relationship with the homeless population and how complicated our relationship is, because the homeless are invisible to us in the same ways that their argument is that the traditional cisgender heteronormative body is invisible to us, and we assume that there's an assumption that white bodies and heteronormative cisgender women, somebody like me, is not necessarily visible in the same sense because it's the norm. It's and so people say that there is no race unless we're talking about people of color, but white is race. And so this is when he's talking about queering the body, when they're talking about queering our bodies and their bodies, they're queering the queering is both as the reader and the writer. They are forcing us to think about our own bodies. They're forcing us to think about our position as a reader. They're forcing us to see these things as not transparent, including the objects of reading and writing. So the book that we read from left to right is transparent because, I mean, not exactly transparent, but we don't think of it as an object because it is an object that is so common that it's just not a thing, right? It's, we don't think about, we talked about the technologies that exist in our lives. We don't think about them because they're so normed. And so this theme of queering things is to disrupt them, to force them to the surface, to complicate them, to make them weird. Jonathan Alexander gave a keynote one time where he invoked, you remember the Radiohead song, I'm a Creep? Yeah, winner. So he uses that theme, creep, to be creepy, to present as a creep. I mean, he's and he starts with a student comment in response to his very vaguely flamboyant queer body that the student didn't know what to do with, and so he said he's creepy. Yeah. Anyway, creep us out. So we'll look at some of these other ones next time after next. Spend a lot of time working on your final projects. I think be thinking about those things. There's some other links to click through that are less complex, that are a little bit more straightforward, that deal with hashtags and so forth. I want to talk, as I have been wanting to for several weeks, about the Digital Archive of Literacy Narratives and some of the possibilities in there, including a book on the Digital Archives of Literacy Narratives that is part of this series. Oops, get off there. The Archives Pedagogical Approaches to this is also one of the CC digital presses. And there is a dissertation happening right now that deals with those that we should talk about that is essentially a digital humanities project. So that's all I'm going to say. You guys have any questions or things? You want to be done? Me too. All right. I will see you guys in a couple of weeks. If you have questions, let me know. Bye, guys. Good night.